Welcome to 75 years of fire, faith, and family right here in Smithville, Tennessee. This is New Life United Pentecostal Church, a story that started in a courthouse, roared through revivals, and built sanctuaries just like the one you're sitting in today. I am your guide through this journey, and get ready, folks, because this little rural town has seen big Pentecostal power. It all began in 1950, but the fuse was lit in 1945. Picture Smithville, a sleepy Tennessee hill town. Trudy Vickers, with her sheriff cousin's help, preached her first sermon at the local courthouse, packed to the brim. By 1947, a tent revival drew 2,500 souls, forcing the locals to direct traffic. That fire built New Life's first home at Short Mountain and Adams Street. One prayer meeting raised $1,660.62. That's over $23,500 today. From those roots, New Life was born in 1950, shaking Smithville for Jesus.
Hi, I'm Michelle Walker, and I was a member of the original First United Pentecostal Church at the corner of Adams Street and Short Mountain Highway. The church was fairly a large church. It had 3 stories. The basement was the fellowship hall, and also later turned into a Sunday school room off the side. The street level held our auditorium and also the nursery. The top level, which we refer to as the upper room, we had Sunday school classes, the pastor's study, the prayer rooms, and also just storage.
In 1985, tragedy struck the First Pentecostal Church when a fire broke out and the church was a total loss.
To watch your church burn, to actually be there, to see it burn to the ground, the feeling is really indescribable. It's like a death. It really is. It was just very devastating to the entire congregation. The church members met the next day at the scene where the church had burned, and we all had a prayer meeting, and we were all encouraged that God was going to see us through this.
About 57 years. I've been here 57 years, 58 years. It was a great church. Brother Milam was a great man. He was a good pastor, and he was a hard worker. He made peanut brittle. They made peanut brittle faithfully to pay for that church, and he would get all over town. Everybody knew Brother Milam from town. You go and say something about Brother Milam, they say, "Is that the peanut brittle man?" "Yeah, that's the peanut brittle man." Everybody in town knew him as the peanut brittle man. November the 4th, 1971, Laurel Hill burned after we had just got everything fixed and ready for it. And then Bill Heim had called my dad and says, "I have a little building down here y'all can use to have church in until you rebuild." So we went to the little building down there and had church in the little building. And I think it was 1972 when we came back, got the church rebuilt and came back to the church. And we had church outside under the trees, and we did everything that summer till we got it rebuilt and rebuilt our church. But I mean, it was, Doyle Neal is the one who was there when it burned. Doyle Neal built it. He was a carpenter. He's the one that, he built Love Cantrell Funeral Home over there. And he rebuilt it, and we've had great services. I mean, we had some great services over there. We've had some great pastors come there, some great revivals. And Brother Billy Watkins, I remember him especially when he came in. But the thing best about Doyle Neal, he could take that guitar and he could fill those altars. I mean, he was a man of God at that time. He was really a man of God at that time.
There were a couple of pieces of property that we were looking at that was going to come up for auction at the courthouse. And our pastor at the time, Brother Larry Sims, he and the board members had got together. They had come and they had walked the couple of pieces of property and decided that they wanted a piece of property that was on the right side of the road. So we all gathered there on those that could, we gathered at the courthouse steps on that day of the auction. And the piece of property that we wanted was the very first piece that went up for bid. Within 5 seconds, it went way beyond the price that we were even prepared to pay. It went triple. We had to regroup very fast. So about 5 minutes in between the bid, our pastor said, we're going to have to bid on the other piece of property. The piece of property that we were going to be bidding on would require a lot more land development and clearing. But we decided to bid on that piece because it was on the main highway. And as the bidding started, it was just our church and another local guy who happened to be one of our doctors in town. And he would bid and we would bid. And he would bid and we would bid. It was just between us two. And he, at one point, turned to someone next to him. He couldn't see us and we couldn't see him. It was a large crowd and we had no idea who was bidding. And he asked someone next to him, who am I bidding against? And they said, you're bidding against the Pentecostal church. And he immediately stopped his bidding. And he said, I'm going to give it to them. I'm not going to be bidding against them.
Fast forward to 1988, before our current vision of reconcile, restore, and repurpose had a name, God instilled it into our DNA. 3 churches, Laurel Hill with Paul Sanders, First United with Larry Sims, and Calvary United with C.W. Milam, united at Laurel Hill in a service that shook the rafters. No more my church, your church, just one body for one big God. That unity experienced in that service birthed a dream, a new home at 860 South Congress Boulevard. Laurel Hill was sold. Insurance funds from the fire at First Church turned ashes to glory, and in 1992, the 860 rose, built by this church's hands. September of 92, that first service, pure joy.
I think it was a God thing. I really do. I think it was a God thing. I know there was the 3 churches that had split from the one, and I think it was meant to be that we all went back together. You know,
it was a very powerful service. It was very unique, because you hear about churches dividing all the time, and you rarely hear them coming back together. And we had voted, and it was voted by the separate congregations that Pastor Paul Sanders would be the pastor of this great unity service experiment, whatever you want to call it, this church, this merger that we were doing. And he was just God sent for a time such as that. Very diplomatic man. He was known throughout the whole district as being a diplomat. This was not the first time that he had brought congregations together, or at least gone in and reunited the people who were there. He was very much a diplomat, and so he was the one to see that we all came together as one. And I venture to say that only a very handful of us can point out today who came from what church, because you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And from the time we merged together as one, we were one.
New Life kept marching forward. In 2006, Paul Sanders retired, leaving big shoes to fill. After months of searching, Dwayne Cornelius stepped up in 2007, bringing a vision that defines us: reconcile, restore, and repurpose. Under his lead, we bought the Connection Center in 2012. It became a hub for ministry, blessing all of Smithville with DeKalb Christian Academy, our community private school, and Kids Connection Early Learning Center for the town's future generations. Then, in 2024, we built this very sanctuary you're sitting in today, a space to carry that vision forward. The future, it's here, and it's ours.
I remember after Pastor Sanders resigned, we had a business meeting, and the board brought us all together to explain to the church body what the process was going to be. And as they spoke, of course, everybody, his feelings are raw about it, but I remember after they asked, was there any comment, I stood and I said, we need to remember that we don't have to take the first guy that comes, because this is a great church. It had a great foundation spiritually, financially, and we knew that people would be vying for this church. So we didn't want to jump, into something with the first guy. And then Pastor C was our first guy, the first minister that came through to preach for us. And after that service, I remember saying to people, okay, I'm ready, let's vote.
Well, this was obviously the building that was here when we came. A great foundation had been built. Of course, you've already heard the story of 3 churches combining, unifying together, and being on this one property. They had paid for the property. It was paid for. And so we were set for growth. The foundation was laid. Things were set for us to grow. And that's just what's happened. We continued to grow over the 18 years that we have been here in a tremendous way. So much so we had to change the name of the building to the 860 because it became our children's building for the most part. That's all that really happens over here anymore is children's ministry, and so we didn't want to call it children's ministry building. Sure. So we went with the 860, which is really just the address. Funny stories. Ryan Hewling was the first one when we were trying to do names, and he pops off with, and Ryan, he said, well, we'll just call it Papa C's Playhouse, because all the kids called me Papa C, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. That's an idea, it's not. Yeah. But when we went with the 860, it drew a lot of attention in town. The best free advertisement, somebody made us the panels for free, and it stirred up a lot of things because this is such a landmark in town. They thought maybe we had sold the building, we had turned it into an event center. I mean, they just went down the line of things that happened. I had one minister in town that came to me and he said, I've searched everywhere I can find in the Bible. I've looked for 860 soldiers. I've looked for chapter 8 and verse 60. He said, and I just knew it had to be something like that. And I said, well, really, bro, it's just the address. He goes, it can't be. And I said, that's it. And I said, but I am glad that I caused you to study the Bible so hard. Yeah. And we were doing a memorial service over at the funeral home, another pastor in town, and he told me, he said, I got to ask a question. I said, what is it? He goes, the 860. I said, yes, sir. He said, what is it? My wife says it's just the address, but I told her it couldn't be that simple. And I said, well, your wife is exactly right. It's just that simple. Yeah. And so we've progressed and we've grown from that point, connected with a sidewalk here, unique story that the state representative at the time helped us make this happen so that we could actually connect the 2 buildings because their initial plan, it was to stop at the Connection Center. And so they helped us see that this happens. And so now we have this beautiful sidewalk to walk down, connecting our properties. And of course we're gifted the property in the center between the 2. There was a couple of acres of property there so now we own the entire segment. Wow. 17 and a half acres, 65,000 square feet of property. So God's really blessed us.
That's amazing. And really when you got here, we hear a lot and people say it, and you've kind of self-admitted that you're a big dreamer. Yeah. And and really the Brother Sanders and the other churches, the other pastors that have been here before us and laid the groundwork, really set us up on a main highway. That's why we hear so much traffic. That's why it gets so much buzz when things change. But tell us about what's transpired with the growth. How did the Connection Center become the Connection Center? What was it before? How did your vision come to pass in that regard?
Well, those first few years, again, solid foundation that was already here and already here for us. A lot of seed already planted. And so the church started to grow. And it grew at such a pace that we were going to have to expand. And so we actually looked and had drawings done to expand behind the 860 building. But I just kept seeing this building next door to us that's 36,000 square feet. Used to be a Pomida when we came to town. But when Walmart came to town, it kind of put Pomida out of business. And so I'd drive by, all the time. God, that'd be a great building. God, that'd be a great building. And the first time I called them, they said, yeah, we'll rent it to you. It's $11,000 a month. And I said, yeah, that's not happening. Wow. And I understood why the others went out of business. That's a lot of T-shirts and underwear, $11,000 a month. So anyway, we would drive by, and one day I was going by again, and I just said, you know what, I've had a rough day. I mean, all they can tell me is no. And so I called up and just happened to connect with the right person. And long story short, we ended up with the Connection Center building for $500 a month on a 10-year lease. And then 5 years in, they came to us and said, we really want to sell the building. We're trying to get out of that area, so we want to sell the building. I'd like to sell it to you guys because you've already done so much to it. And so I made a low ball offer of $350,000, which is extremely low ball offer. Yeah. But I figured, hey, if they take it, what a great deal. And so back and forth negotiations, we ended up at $400,000.
Wow.
There were times when I stood up in front of the church and I just claimed it. I said, God's going to give us that building. And we ultimately paid $400,000 for a $4 million plus at that time building. So in essence, when someone came to me and said, Pastor, I thought that God was just going to give us that building. I said, well, you know what? He did. All that we did is paid our tithe on what he blessed us with.
Oh, wow.
And so in essence, that's what it really was, just that, a gifting from God.
Yeah. And so with the Connection Center, and that, I've heard the story before, but it rings so prevalent of the testimony of what God is doing at New Life and how he expands us. But I just would like to know, I know what the Connection Center is now, and I'm sure you'll talk about it here in just a second, but what was the vision for the Connection Center when, they accepted and confirmed a $400,000 purchase? Did it feel too big? What was the plan? What was the vision?
At first it was just overwhelmingly exciting.
Sure.
And we had a dream for a daycare. We immediately went into the process of setting up plans and setting it up to have a daycare in it. And then in the future, we wanted to have a school as well, but also knew it was going to be fellowship hall area for the church and activities. And we named it the Connection Center because we wanted it to be a building that connected us with our community. And that's just what it did. We've put in a daycare that has 100 students. We've got a school that's got 85 plus students. We've held events on this property that have been 1,500 plus. And so there's just been a lot of things that it's done. It's used by our community. We have used it to really connect with who we are in this community, and people know us. They know who the church is.
Yeah, and so you put in the daycare, you got it going, and then this vision of a school. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
Well, I think it was always there in the back of my mind. We felt like the daycare would be the segue to the school. The idea was that we start from basically birth and carry them all the way through graduation. We have some students right now that started off in our daycare. I believe they're probably 6th grade now, 7th grade. And so in just a few years, we're going to graduate somebody who started off in our daycare, which has really been the dream, is that we would do that. We're actually having our very first graduate this year of DeKalb Christian Academy. Yeah. And so we're seeing the dream come to life. And yeah, it's overwhelming. It's a lot, when you look at what we have and what God has blessed us with. And I say it often, we don't really deserve it. But when we just stay faithful to God, God is faithful to us. And this is what we have.
Yeah. So I guess the question I would have, and maybe some are asking this, and maybe some people in our church still wonder this, was the church ever moving here a part of the plan? Did you ever think we would move from 860 to here or incorporate it the way it has been? Was that ever a dream or anything?
That part of it was not ever really in the plan. It just kind of evolved that way. Actually, our plan was to expand the 860 building and try to get more seating. We were going to have to add areas for foyer and things of that nature. And we were headed that direction, so we moved over to this building into what was the gym at the time for church. And we ended up being here for 3 years. But in that first year, because of the space we had, we grew 70 people, 75, 100 people. And so ultimately what ended up happening is we outgrew even the expansion that we were going to do. And so with that being said, we had to transition into something else, and that is what developed into the worship center. So it wasn't that we planned on having church here. It's just kind of how it evolved in the process.
Sure, and obviously just looking at it and everything that has happened since you've been here, you know, it's just a miracle and a testimony of God.
Sure.
So I know you'll tell us a little bit more about it in a minute, but kind of explain kind of your thought process about what we have and kind of where we're going.
Well, I know we're going to talk a little bit about where we're going, but the reality is this right here, you know, there's an old saying that if you see a turtle on a fence post, he didn't get there by himself. And the reality is, you know, this is the fence post and I'm the turtle. Because there's been so many years of foundation that's been laid and all of the ministries that went before us, and the foundation that was laid, the seed that's been planted in this community, and how God has continued to just evolve that. And we're just now reaping. You know, we're reaping crops that we didn't sow, and we're reaping those blessings because of it. And we're seeing God do great things. And I'm thankful for the fact of the future and where we're going. And maybe I was just you know, my good friend Brother Jeff Arnold says, I'm just a slob doing my job. And so, you know, I'm that sloppy turtle that's sitting up on the fence post that got here because of the help of other people and because of the sacrifice that was made prior to us even being here. Absolutely. I'm only 18 years of the 75.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot laid prior to us even being here.
Absolutely. Well, let's go talk about what the future holds for New Life.